Welcome. Thanks for joining us on the live stream if you're here live and for watching later on if you're not live. Today we're going to do a deep dive into game design, talking about game design. We'll be doing a little bit more of this in the upcoming conversations just to talk about design. How do you make your game good? How do you make it compelling and interesting and thoughtful? I've got an interesting thing I would like to show in a moment, and it is on the computer. That sounded really not suitable for work, what I said just then, but I got something to show. Tim, do you have something to show as well today? We haven't
I
talked about this. Surprise, surprise. We haven't prepared the specific, a bit of a secret, what I've got and what he's got.
yeah, I think we'll keep it a secret. I've got a few things to show as well, and I think we can. I think
Awesome.
we'll see. We'll learn a few things about the game we picked.
Awesome. Well, I've found a game that's not a game that I thought as a group we could talk about what we would do if we were going to turn it into a game. So let me show you over here on this screen. Share screen. It's from Steam that I'm having a look at it. It's a game called Townscaper, and it's positioned as play rather than a game. And it seems kind of a tech demo that's got some good momentum on Steam. Lots of people checking it out and liking it and playing it. So this is it. This is Townscaper. And I'll show you what we can do. Then we can talk about what we might want to do. You just click and then boom, you build some land. And then you click where you want to build more land and you build some more land. And you can change your colors over on the left-hand side. Maybe we'll go for some green type stuff. And that's just changing, or nothing at the moment because I'm just building the land. Then if I build on the land, whoop, I build a house, which is kind of cool. I can move around as I'm moving around here. How do I rotate? Up like that. If I want to build more of the house, I just click to the side of the house. And if I want to build the house up, I can. And so just click, click. Basically, it's very relaxing. You can't hear the sound effects, unfortunately, because we're not clever enough to do that with our setup here. But it's just going bloop, 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 which is kind of cool and satisfying. So I'm making greenhouses now. I'm making a blue house.
Can you control anything outside of the color and the click?
No, I can't control what they look like. What I can control is, say I've got this little area here where I'm building. I might want to have some sort of bridge thing underneath there. If I close that in and put some, didn't want to do that one. Right click. If I put some stuff around the side of it, then it makes this nice little area here where you could sit there. I mean, it's so tranquil and relaxing. It reminds me of traveling around Europe in terms of the objects here, but that's
It's
kind
just
of it.
auto
You can
adds the benches and all that stuff. And
auto adds all the stuff
wow,
and add some stuff to the side. I might say let's build what other color? Build a white thing down the end here, just a little house down the end. And there we go. We've got a house down the end. So this is the full extent of the game. There's no goals, there's no objective, there's no missions, there's no win, there's no loss. And I thought it could be interesting for us to just bounce around. If this was us, if we were working on a prototype and we're like, you know what, this feels so good to do. And this is the core, I think, of great game design is if the action just feels good to do, which this really does, you just click around and you can build some stuff and then, build some stuff there. And it's very satisfying hearing the sound and, the bloop and seeing things plop into the water. So once you've got this core game mechanic, how do you then turn it into a game? So if this was you, Tim, if you and I had bounced this around, we'd made this tech demo, what would be your starting point? Or what would be our starting point for saying, how do we give this more of a structure for a game so that people don't, play it for 10 minutes and then say, oh, there's nothing to do?
right. I think step one is probably adding in some more interesting decisions, right? So
Yep.
that's why I asked what do you actually have control over? And it seems like a really cool, like I could totally see how it's relaxing. You just kind of pop stuff there, and it seems to have algorithmic rules to how it lays stuff out and how it makes stuff beautiful, which is amazing. But there's no, it's kind of making the decisions for you. And so I could see how, like, from a relaxing standpoint, that's cool. But if we wanted to turn it into a game, I think we'd need some kind of objective, and then we need to make some interesting decisions along the way to that objective.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, let's brainstorm that a little bit. Someone asked if I can write my name. Let's see if I can. Um,
It's interesting because I've studied city builders for a while, and I've prototyped a few. And the problem with a lot of city builders and like building games, it tends to be like, how do you end them,
mm,
right? So like a lot of them are really cool and they have all these objectives and you can build all this cool stuff, whether it's castles or cyberpunk cities or anything. But how do you end a game that's about being creative? It's really complicated, and oftentimes a lot of these games, they end at arbitrary points. They like reach 10 victory points, or you know raise 20 citizens or something like that. And
yeah.
honestly, the ending a lot of these games is not the strong point. It feels
Mm.
really weak and
Yeah,
bad, and you spend all this
you
time
don't
building a
have to
thing.
end you don't have to end though. I mean, the most recent game that I've put time into, city builder type game, has been banished, and not the game has been banished. The game is called
Right.
banished, and it's I don't know. You just play until you get sick of it. That was my feeling to it, and
Yeah.
um,
And that's how most people play. But like as a game designer, usually you can't just leave stuff open ended because people there's a certain subgroup that just can't handle it. But what's interesting? There's a game called They Are Billions, and that game is basically an RTS city builder hybrid. But the idea is
mm,
that you build out a city, and every couple minutes or so, there's a wave of zombies, and then the wave of zombies keeps getting bigger and bigger until at the
right,
end there's this giant epic wave of all these crazy zombies. And I thought that was cool because it takes a city builder kind of deal, but it gives you a tower defensey aspect to it, and it kind of gives you a finite goal and a finite ending, right? Because at the end of the kind of wave of zombies, you either have survived, so you win, or you get decimated, in which case you don't want to continue, right? Just because your
yeah.
city's gone.
Well,
So it's definitely a
it
different genre than this, but I liked it.
Yeah, and it depends. There's a little bit of a conversation of scope in all this. So my first inclination is people. Let's have some people walking around, which is a pretty common sort of city builder type mechanic where you say you've got to care for your people. And then you get all of these mechanics to do with the health of the people, having enough rooms for them to sleep in, and the interactions. But that's a huge undertaking with all the AI and the the tuning of the spreadsheets and balancing and stuff. So if you're enjoying just the city aspect of it, or the buildings and the land aspect, then maybe it's a um, more of a puzzle type mechanic where we're looking at, you've got a certain number of bricks and a certain objective. So it's saying build 3 dwellings with 10 clicks. So that could be a very simple way of saying, is it
Yeah,
enjoyable to have a click limit? So then we could say, up in the top left corner, I could just have whatever 40 clicks, and it says build a thing with 40 clicks. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? Well, I need to have the ground. Is that going to be enough ground? And then, oh, if I put it out there, then I can put a house on that little bit, but that's not very efficient. So I can really start to prototype quickly. I think that without building all of the code to make those rules, what we could say is, let's just pretend we've got a limit. So, okay, Tim, give me a limit and tell me what to do. And then you might say, okay, the limit is 20, build 5 houses. Okay, let's see if that's fun. One, two. Okay, is that one house or 2 houses? Maybe that's one house, but you get a lot of points for a bigger house. So you could literally just get there and say, with your 20 clicks, you could just say, one house, 2 house, 3 house, 4 house, 5 house, etc. But maybe we don't give ourselves a lot of points for single houses. The goal here is, how do you get a multi-house dwelling, or a multi-dwelling house like that? That's a more powerful way to win, this level, or
yeah,
this challenge. So I would say then, in terms of how you would figure that out, you just pretend you've got those rules and you pretend to play the game like that, and you say, is it fun having those limits? And if it is, then you can build upon that a little bit further. What else do you, just brainstorming here, if we were designers working on this team, what else could we brainstorm that's not super scopy to turn this into, I've got decisions and got an objective?
yeah. I mean, so as a marketing guy, one of the first things I think about is who's it for. And so what I would assume, if we were this far along in development and we have something as cool as this, we'd probably want to keep the same vibe, right? So we'd probably be for the same person that this is for. And this seems like a very relaxed, casual audience. And
Yep.
so I think I'm on board with kind of what you were saying about having to do things within limits, but I think we could take it the other way and have challenges that can be failed with no real consequence, right? That could pop up and say, "Hey, can you build just like you were saying, 5 houses in 20 clicks or whatever?" And they could succeed, and they could reward you with more challenges, or build a tower, however tall you did, connect things in the air, that kind of stuff. And we could actually reward you with additional unlocks. So maybe now you get purple color, or you get
Mm,
whatever color palettes, or cool things based on challenges. And then if you fail a challenge, they can just go away and replace with a different one. And
mm,
it could totally be optional. But this seems like a relaxing type of game where you don't necessarily want constraints. Because I have found that, like, sometimes the constraint systems get in the way of creativity. That's why usually, like, a lot of city builders, or even Minecraft, has like a creative mode, because
yeah.
like sometimes people like the systems of the game, but they don't like the constraints. They want to build a thing
Right.
using the systems.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those games end up with creative modes because people just request that so much. And it doesn't mean that the survival aspect of that game is bad. It just means that it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And therefore, if you make it too rigid, then it loses that joy. Like playing The Sims, there's goals in The Sims, but you can just build, like, I just want to build a pretty house. I just want to build a house that's got two floors on it. I just want to build a house where people get trapped in the toilet or whatever it is that you think is kind of interesting and fun. And that's why people add a really good dynamic. If the goal is people have to live over on island A, have to live on the K over here, um, and then, but people have to be able to walk, stroll to the park over down here, figure out how to do that. That kind of objective. And along the way, people can build pretty houses. So the having a limit of the number of times you can click is contrary to that joy of just sort of building stuff. So I think, my initial idea probably takes the game away from what it's intended to be, that
Right.
relaxing, I just want to build a pretty city. So I think that whatever game we make still needs to have, I want to build a pretty city. Um, and it could be some other sort of resource that we experiment. So there's some sort of currency that's being generated that allows me to build more stuff. And so then maybe we're making a tourism game. You've got to build this pretty little town that the tourists want to come to. And why would they want to do that? And it's less about managing the interactions of people. It's just more about
Yeah.
build something that's postcard worthy.
Totally. And I think one of the best ways to reinforce behavior and build a good game design system within a constraint or a tech demo like this is to reward players with more of what they want, right? So like in my game Photophobia, for example, like one of the things that I did was there's these broken hearts that you can get. They're like kind of collectibles and really hard spots. And my philosophy was, hey, the people that are collecting those really hard, difficult to unlock collectibles are going to want additional hard content. So the way you unlock the hardest content in the game is by collecting those hard to get pieces. And basically, that just says the players that are going to do that are the ones that are going to want that content. Same thing here. Like if you are giving objectives to players where the things they're going to want are color palettes or additional building types or whatever, I think you could reward that to them, knowing that that's going to be kind of what they get out of it. And there could be creative ways to show that off. Like this game, the technology is amazing. The fact that it just kind of populates all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's pretty. I mean, now that I'm actually trying to build something that looks nice rather than just randomly clicking around. But you look in here, you see the stairs that are winding their way up. There's got to be something to do with that.
That's
You know,
insane. That's
appreciating how pretty and nice that looks. I think in whatever it is that we're building.
that's
I don't think
amazing that
we've
it
done a
could
very
just
good
do
job
that.
of brainstorming how to turn this into a game, to be honest. Maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe this is the whole point of just relaxing play. Um, and maybe it's having a way to showcase your city or giving people some prompts. Here's a town in a certain country. See if you can recreate it. So the game might be about just the community trying to recreate um,
Yeah.
certain places.
Well, I mean,
Because
let's keep in mind, I mean, not to bring gambling into this, but, like, let's keep in mind that a slot machine really isn't a game in a traditional sense. You press a button and then it just spins and then
that's
you
different
either win or
though.
you
That's
lose.
an interesting conversation because you have a goal and a win condition and a loss condition. And here we don't
That's
have a
true.
win or a loss condition. So even though gambling, slot machines, you don't actually, there's no decision or skill. There is win and loss.
That's true, but I think I've really adapted my definition of a game over the last few years because I've seen stuff that reminded me of a slot machine. Like if you ever go to like Dave and Buster's in the States, which is like a giant arcade, you'll see like these Monopoly games that just light up and they're all kinds of stuff. And it's like a simplified version of Monopoly where basically you roll a dice and the dude moves and then you get as many tickets as are on the space he lands, which is, you could argue like, where is the game in that? You're just rolling a dice and seeing what happens. Like it's completely random. You didn't affect that at all. Who knows what the computer's doing under the hood, right? Like I used to think that games required kind of decisions, but I think there are some games that, I mean, I think there I think the definition of games is really not up to designers to decide, right? Like people can, they definitely play games that I wouldn't consider games and they have a lot of fun with it. People definitely play completely random games like shoots and ladders. You ever seen that game? You roll a dice, you go up a board. It's a completely
Yeah.
random game. Kids, for whatever reason, absolutely love it. They love this completely random game that has no decisions whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe you're right. Maybe this doesn't need that. I mean, I think it could benefit from some sort of objectives and unlocks, but other than that, there's not much I would
I,
change.
I think if yeah, I mean, I still go back to people because I'm making this place. I'm really attracted to the pathways and the way to connect from A to B and how
Yeah,
you would actually get up here. So obviously, to be a big technical undertaking, how do you have your people go through the house and open the doors? Walking up the stairs. Where are they trying to get to? Pathfinding and stuff. But I think that would be where I would take this game. Having some folks strolling around, I think would really add to the personality and
yeah,
purpose. And then it would be quite straightforward, I think, to figure out, are you just trying to get as many, just increase your population? That's it. And so all I need is one little number up there. I've got 20 people who want to come here. And I know that if everything's well connected and everyone can get everywhere, then they're happy. And so I think that for me would bring this to life. We've got these birds over on the roof over here. Whoop, over here. Um, why can I not get to there? Anyway, because I'm a bit useless. So we've got some birds. I think just having the folks strolling around, that for me would be the game changer that would, I'd then be able to set tasks that didn't feel like I'm breaking this joy of just placing stuff down.
yeah,
Um, I think would really add to it, adding some people.
yeah. It is kind of it's adorable and cute, but it's kind of eerie that it's all empty.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like this cute city in the middle of the water, and it's like nobody's there.
And that goes back to showing off your work, and it's a little bit. This is just for me at the moment, although we're all watching it and talking about it. But as I do this lovely little area, it's just for me, and I think players need to have some relationship with something where they're seeing it, but there's also a character or a personality or an avatar that they're able to interact with. And if we have our little people walking around, I think the folks playing the game would instantly feel protective of those people, instantly feel a relationship with those little people running around because I'm building this beautiful city for them. And so all it would take is, I put in this bridge here, and if there's someone standing there and I put in the bridge and that person just goes, yay, then for me, I'd be like, I'm looking after my citizens. That for me would transform this action of putting in the bridge, that one just there, boom, that would transform it from me just being like, I don't know, I'm just kind of putting things around and making something pretty into like, I don't want to say I'm God because when we play God games, we're not literally thinking we're God, but thinking I'm the protector, I'm the creator. I did that for my little character down here who could just be a simple little, stick figure character just going, yay. I'm like, yeah,
See,
stick figure.
that's one way to look at it. When I watch my fiance play Sims, she like puts people in the pool and deletes the ladder, so then they
Well,
drown to death. Maybe some people
well,
would.
with great power comes great responsibility, huh?
Exactly.
She's clearly an evil lady.
Well, it's funny because she'll tell me the story of how, yeah, well, that guy was causing problems in the relationship and she really thought these two people should be together, but he owned
Yeah,
the house, so she had to get rid of him. And it's like, but those emergent stories come from people interaction.
yeah,
we add these intentions on top of these characters that we watch around. And what you would say is, oh, I made that guy happy by building that bridge, right? Like that's the story that you tell. And you like built this
mm,
whole town and all this stuff. And I think those emergent stories are important. They're not the only type of experience, right? Like I think this as a tech demo by itself kind of gives you a certain happy kind of building experience, but I think
yep.
a different, equally interesting experience could be kind of emergent stories from a bunch of people walking around.
Absolutely. I think that the two things I would play with in terms of turning this into, exploring to see whether we'd want to make this a game would be number one, just having some people walk around and see what comes from that, and number two, having some sort of currency. So I can't just be like, blah 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 with willy nilly. I'm actually spending some coins when I do that. So if I start with 30 coins and then now have 29, 28, 27, the base might cost a certain amount, the
Yeah,
house might cost a certain amount, and just seeing, and then something that makes the money go up. So, for example, having
yeah,
having a base doesn't do anything to the money. Having a single dwelling makes it go up slowly. Having a
right,
multi dwelling makes it go up more quickly. Um, having a tower makes it go up really quickly. And then we would need a trade off between, well,
right.
I can see how to make the money go up and I can see how to make it go down. How do I make good decisions with my money?
Yeah,
Uh, what are the constraints? So they would
you
be the
know,
two things I'd play around with to see. And like I was saying before, you don't need to build those entire systems. You can just pretend that they're implemented. It's like, okay, we've got 20, that cost 19, I've got 18, I've got what's after that? 17. And then, okay, maybe that costs two. Or maybe gray houses cost less. So that's two. But if I want to make a pretty yellow house, that's three, and so on. And then we can just play around with that. And particularly if you're working on a team, you can have that conversation together.
yeah, for sure. I do think it brings up an interesting point though, because there's a thing in design called intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? And the fact that there is no currency or there is no reward for doing what you're doing means that the joy that you get out of it is intrinsic. It's coming purely from the joy of creation, right? But the
Mm,
second you start incentivizing colored houses or towers or whatever, suddenly there's an extrinsic motivation. And there are studies that show that some extrinsic motivation can actually remove intrinsic motivation. So
yeah.
by adding external rewards, you can actually remove the internal sense of
Well, I
completion
think
that you get.
I think back to your previous point, Tim, about some people just want creative mode where they just plop
Right.
things down. So we need to then look at player segments and say, we're not trying to make a game that is everything for everyone. But I think only having this creative mode means the people who are going to be into it are much smaller than if we
Right.
also have that second mode of, you know, protect the people or build the city or complete the goal. So I think then you can satisfy both of those. And personally, I think the best way to do it is to have a game where the people who are just intrinsically motivated by, oh, this is kind of nice to do, they can do it. They just might not win. And if they don't care about that, that's okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, it's really going to come down to the players, right? Like I know, for example, if I was really into the vibe of this game, and then suddenly there was constraints, like I can't build more than whatever, I have to pay a piece of gold per thing. I do think for me that would take away some of the fun. But at the same time, building towards a goal, getting currency for doing things, and all that can feel very rewarding. So it's one of those
Mm.
things, just like anything, that I think you'd have to play test and make sure that it was perfect. This thing is really blowing my mind. The fact that you can make all these
Yeah.
creative little
You know,
pieces.
it's programmatically, I think it's pretty straightforward. This kind of adaptive model stuff, if I put it there, I need to change the thing. But creatively, I think they've done such a beautiful job of clicking there, and then it changes what trees I've got, or putting these pot plants, having the
Right.
ornamental things are massive. And this is back to polish that we talked about a lot during
Yeah.
the game jam conversation. That um, put more time into polish than you do into making the mechanics, because polish is what's made this. Clicking and having those little things go splop out and go blop into the water, that's the magic in this whole process. Cool. So, I mean, just while we've been chatting away, I've made this kind of city, and it seems really interesting. It seems like there's a lot going on in there. Yeah, I don't have a relationship with it. I'm sort of, it looks pretty, but I'm not looking at it and saying, oh, this is old man Ferguson's house, and this is, where the tourists make their way
Right.
over, and this is so. I'd like to see something where I actually felt, it was more than just random sort of clicking and plopping.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what's the name of that game? I said it before. It's
Townscaper.
Townscaper. It's very interesting, and I think it was really great exercise for us just to look at how would we take a tech demo and turn it into something that could be a game with goals and decisions, etc. So that was that.
Yeah. So I want to show off something that I found absolutely fascinating, and I've been super obsessed with, and I want to kind of share the design space with you guys, and maybe not so much do kind of like we did with Townscaper, and talk about how we can make a game out of it, because I think it's already a pretty good game. But I think just thinking about it from the aspect of design and deep dive and kind of what's amazing about it, what I really like about it. So, see if I can share just the window, which I can. This game is called Stacklands, and if you don't know,
Stacklands.
it is made by a collective called Sock Pop, which they're on Patreon, and for I think it's for $5 a month, you can get one game a month. They make a game every month, and they give it out to their Patreon people. But let's do normal. So this game is a card game mixed with sort of a city builder simulation game. Okay, and basically I've got a card pack here, and I open up my card pack. But what's cool about this game is all these different cards I can move around, and I've got a villager, and the villager can stack on top of a thing like a berry bush, and he'll start poking around for berries. And this is such a simple concept. It just pops out the berry from the berry bush.
So everything's always cards. You don't actually see people running
It's
around.
all cards. Everything's cards.
Wow.
And this game gets very complex. There's even combat in this game. There's you can build mines and sheds and all kinds of stuff.
It's a great way if you're not a 3D modeler, or you don't want to create the art assets. It's all just cards with pictures on them. If you're better at making icons.
Absolutely. It's awesome because there's coins too, and then up here you can buy card packs that have different things in them as well. So if we put this on wood, for example, I know from playing that if I put a villager on wood, it turns into a stick, and a stick is worth 2 coins. And then as soon as I've got my stick, I can sell it. I can get 2 coins. Now I've got 3 coins, and I can buy another pack of cards.
Wow. Nice.
And then, oh, look, I
Wow,
found
what
a
a clever
rabbit. So
mechanic, huh?
I've got to
So
fight the
simple.
rabbit, and they fight each other.
Nice.
But then I get bone, or sometimes I get meat, and I need a campfire to cook the meat, for example, to make it edible. But I can put my villager on my tree, and he will just, sometimes he'll find wood, sometimes he'll find an apple. This game is called Stacklands. I'm literally obsessed with this game. I can't stop playing it, and I don't know why. What the other thing that's really cool about this game is obviously the mechanics cool. I think the mechanics have been used before by a game called Cultist Simulator, I believe. So it's got like the kind of the card mechanic. But this is a beautiful merging of 2 different genres. Oh, the other part is when the month kind of ends, you have to feed the villagers, and every villager eats 2 food. So that's important. That's the survival aspect of it, right? So this moon here kind of counts up, and you got to make sure you have food available. Otherwise, it's really cool because your villager will turn into a corpse, and I'm not going to spoil what corpses do, but you can do all kinds of stuff with.
Zombie.
There's all kinds of interconnection between cards, and I think this is one of those games that, like, when you see it, it's like, obviously this is so obvious. It's so simple. It's so boiled down to what I think a really good casual game should be.
Mm,
But at the same time, like, it's it takes a lot of work to be this elegant. You know what I mean? Like, I've made enough
yeah.
games to know that when you make something this simple, it's actually comes from a lot of complexity. So I've got a
And I
bone
think
here.
it's a little bit of a theme for today, Tim, is that if the core action in your game is joyful, then you don't need to have a million features, you don't need to have complexity. You just focus on what is joyful. So if it's joyful to have a card and to join the card and to be imagining in your brain, oh, this is a villager eating, this is a villager fighting, and actually having a representation of that,
Right.
then you don't. That's it. That's your game. Then you build upon that, and you put your polish on top of that,
Yeah.
and then you get your spreadsheet out, and what's the progression and what's the conflict that we're dealing with as a player? What's the decision that I need to make as a player? Um, so,
Yeah.
for those folks out there who are working on their game, on their prototype, if you make the same game that people have seen 1,000 times, then it's you're making yet another third person shooter or yet another um, Flappy Bird clone. Then it's difficult to get that joy in the action. I think because people no longer see joy in just running and shooting. But if
Right.
you are making a third person shooter, you say, okay, how can I make you know what? I'm gonna rescind what I just said. You can still make a third person shooter and make the joy in it, but you need to focus on how do I make it just nice to run and nice to jump and nice to shoot. And if it's that motion, maybe it's getting in some visuals or the animation, or there's a floatiness when you jump or when you shoot, you recoil back a little bit. So it's not about the genre. I was kind of wrong the path I was going down there. It's about the feeling and how nice it feels in your hands when you play it. So this
Right.
looks like it feels very nice just to, like, you've got the
Yeah.
card and then just bonk it against it.
The
And there's a
feeling
nice
is super
feeling.
important.
Mm,
Yeah, and something like this, obviously, like, they put a lot of work into the polish and how it does it and how everything just works. Like, I have my card here. When he makes a stone, it's going to flip onto that stone exactly like that. So,
mm,
like, that stuff is super cool. The fact that you can stack cards and just have him work on berry bushes is super cool. But I think one of the things that I realized, and I kind of realized this, like, Townscaper is very similar, is that I like this whole idea of just dragging around a board and just clicking to do stuff, right? And just rearranging stuff. And, like, I want my stones over here. I want my
yeah,
quarry right here, whatever. Like, even if it wasn't a survival card game, which I think is genius, even if it wasn't this, it feels good to just be able to drag around the board and just move my stuff around and arrange it however I want. Like, that's
yeah,
just a cool feeling to me. Like, it does something to my brain where it's like, I feel like I'm organizing my thing. I feel like I'm working towards
mm,
a goal of some sort. And I also feel like I'm setting my own goals at the same time. So, like, it's got these little, like, quests here, which I've done a lot of, which kind of helps you get started. But I've
yep,
noticed I very quickly stopped listening to these at all, and
mm,
just started kind of, okay, I like this game because of the survival uh, integration and this sort of, like, theme that it has portrayed. Like, you're a villager and you're kind of surviving, right? Because of that, I think it intrinsically kind of has a bunch of affordances that make you kind of think about what you would do in the next scenario. Like,
mm,
how do you get more people in your village, right? Like, how do you make sure everybody's fed? How do you do all the stuff that you would do in a normal village? So it comes with kind of preconceived notions of what should be in a survival game, and I think you kind of end up making your own goals as you go because of all that.
and it's showing, like you're saying before, it's showing an absolute classic game design technique, which is joining two genres together. So
Right,
joining together this, what is it? It's kind of like a city builder survival type game with a deck builder card playing type game. And
right,
so I think if you're at home and you've worked on a game or two, and maybe you've done a game jam or two and you're thinking, what game could I make that would be interesting? Then start with a genre that you like and then find another genre and say, how do I join them together? Rocket League for me is the all-time classic of genre
Yeah.
joining, which it's football, soccer joining with cars. It's awesome. It's really great. It worked out well, that combination.
Yeah.
Um, a long, long time ago, one of the first games I made was a top-down rhythm shooter. You have to shoot in time to the beat of the music. So there's a combination of the shooter, the bullet hell kind of shmup, joined with the rhythm mechanic, and I think that's a great way to get you unstuck, and get ideas. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. And the other thing we talked about challenges before, and let me feed my guy real quick. Start a new moon, and then it are not challenges, but constraints, right? So this 10 out of 20 means that I can only have 20 cards at any one time, which at first it doesn't seem like a big deal, but you start to realize like, oh, the cards you can have around are really important. So a rock, for example, is only one card, but when you put him on it, he can find stone, he can find flint, he can find a bunch of other things, and it turns into 3 cards. So it becomes like a micromanaging type of deal as well, until you can build things like the shed, which allow you to have additional cards. So
So so
what I was
Tim,
saying before about the constraints kind of having the opposite effect of
mm,
like making it feel bad to build stuff, it also makes you try to find ways around the constraints and find ways to increase the constraints, and it kind of operates that part of your brain, I think.
to get really practical from a developer point of view, how would you go about behind the scenes designing the flow of this unlocks that, that unlocks this costs that? Would you do a big mind map where you had, you know, lines and arrows and connectors? Would you do it in a big spreadsheet? Because once again, folks who are like, well, I know a thing or two about Unity or Unreal, and yeah, I'd like to make this game, but how do I even
Right.
how do I visualize that so that I can then get in there and code it or create it? How would you visualize that? How would you game designer it?
So I would probably start with a spreadsheet of a bunch of ideas and just dump everything that I could think of that should be in here, and knowing that I'm going to cut 2/3 of it probably, but I would just kind of brain dump all the cool ideas I had. But I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but the way that I would do it, because I've thought about this because this game like literally inspired me. Um, I would probably start with the first 5 minutes of the experience, right? So I would start with that first card pack that I opened, and like what should be in that first card pack. Like what are the things.
How would you do that? Like, just really practical. Would you be writing it in a doc? Would you be thinking about it in your head? Would you get in there and just prototype that
I would
itself?
prototype it. Yeah, I would build it out because I think for me, I'm a very intuitive designer. I I've made enough games to know that my brain emulator is not as good as I think it is, like ever. So I need to kind of feel it. I need to kind of build it.
Mm,
This is the kind of game that I think you could make a pretty decent paper prototype. You know, like
mm.
you we don't have to digitally build it. You can build it in kind of paper with timers and stuff. It wouldn't be as fun, but I think I would probably start with a digital prototype though, just because I think this wouldn't be too complex to build. And I would start with that first 5 minutes. So I would start with the
And
first 5 cards in the first 5 minutes.
and then how would you go about mapping out the progress? So maybe in the end, you're going to end up with 300 cards and tech trees and conflict and choices. How would you
Right.
map that out? Because we can't just put it into our code, because then it becomes this mush of files and references and stuff. How would you visualize that, or type it, or write it down, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I did something similar to this for Cypherpunk, which it's it's a lot more complex when you have things that affect other things, right? And you have to kind of think about how a card impacts another card. So, for example, you got the soil card, and if I put an apple on the soil card, it starts to grow an apple tree. And you need food to live, but if you make it too delicate, you can grow too many apples, and then food is never a problem again, right? Which is kind of the cheating method that I've picked up is you just continue to grow apple trees, and then you don't have to worry about food. But you have to bet. There's there's mathematical balancing and designing, and then there's intuitive balancing and designing, right? And I think I would definitely start with a spreadsheet and start with kind of what cards affect what cards, and I would pick the cards that had more than one interaction with another card. For example, I probably wouldn't put any cards that you could only interact with in one way. So, for example, a quarry, all it does is make stone. But if you put 3 stone on top of each other, you make a brick. And if you add bricks, if you add 2 bricks and like a stick, I think it is, or how do you build a stove? It's 1 brick, an iron bar, and a flint and a villager. So like that builds a stove. And so even though a quarry only builds stone, stone builds other things. So therefore it affects more than one thing. And I would concentrate on those cards. And I would try to think logically through other survival games and how they build stuff and what resources and stuff are required in those games. And I'd start to plan it all out first in a spreadsheet, then probably a mind map type of deal. And then after I got it all implemented, I would still probably tweak it quite a bit more based on how it felt. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, that
Would you
does.
approach it
And
differently, Rick, you think?
well, no, I think pretty similar. A lot of it is just getting in there to your engine and prototyping some stuff.
Right.
But for me, I find it very difficult once my game goes from 5-minute prototype into 10-hour experience to keep it all connected in my brain. So I'm just going to show
Yeah.
this briefly. I would go down the mind map path, and I'd be
Right.
saying, if you've got a villager, what does the villager generate? And I'd be trying to map it out this way. Maybe it's wood, stone, and what else does a villager generate? Like, you know, it, berries, for example, like
Yeah.
food. I know it's not literally like this, but then I would,
Right.
I'd connect these together. One, two, whoop, if I can actually do this properly. Connect them together. And then I would say, okay, what else do I need to do? What's my progression? I'd have a different color for this. So maybe this color is for resource generation. And then if I have
Right.
something which is progression, maybe you can upgrade the villager. Just maybe I would grab the villager, copy paste, put him there, and I would say upgrade one, peasant, whatever it might be. And then I'd give myself a line from here to here. And then I'd need in here some sort of condition that had to be met. So just using sticky notes, but you can make it look however you want in this whole
Right.
flow. So in here, I'd say, for example, 5 stone. And I'd put that in there and I'd say, okay, or X stone is probably better than putting in the number because we don't know what the tuning is going to be. But each time I put X, that means I need to have a certain amount. So I'd have a way of saying X stone to go from being a villager to a peasant. And I look at that and I try to play that in my brain. Okay, villager, collect some stone, do some stuff. Once I've got it, then I can upgrade a peasant. Cool. What does a peasant unlock? Okay, well, that allows me to do, and then maybe I can grab something over here, and that allows me to do a such and such, build a thing, like build a
Right.
house. And so I'd
Yeah.
go through that flow, and I think that way with this mind map approach, you can see what am I missing, and you can also look at it and say, well, how do I get the wood? Okay, oh dang, now I need to figure out what am I doing? So let's get ourselves another sticky note and go off in this other direction up here, where we're going to say to get the wood, you need to chop tree and pop that in there. So then this is going to allow me to see the game and figure it out.
Right.
And then I'm going to say, how do trees come along? And then maybe that comes from the random deck. So I need to have this whole mechanism up here for, okay, so from the deck. And then it's at every X seconds that comes along. So I kind of, some people I think are better at seeing the game in their head.
Yeah.
Other people need to write it down. Other people need to, there's different ways to visualize it. But this is how I would go about just visualizing that expansion of the
Right.
game. And eventually you're going to have a gigantic, mind map or spreadsheet.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying before is like the simpler a game seems, the more complex kind of it is under the hood. And like a lot of work has been put into the design of this, right? Because not only did they have to figure out all of those different pieces, they had to figure out how all the different pieces interacted. And they also had to figure out a flow that doesn't make loops or infinite loops or unlimited resources in any specific way. And then they had to build an onboarding experience to where you kind of ramp up over time, where you don't get stuck or soft locked, basically. because there's a lot of scenarios you can imagine where I might build the wrong things in certain games, and then I don't have enough resources to build the next thing which I need to complete my objectives, right? So that's a very real problem in game design that a lot of games run
Yeah.
into. And this game, even though it doesn't look technically complex, this is dripping with really good design because a lot of work and thought went into how this is all built, and
Absolutely.
I admire it quite a bit. So
So,
yeah,
question from Marcus: would you use virtual post-it notes or real ones? I think this is back to what you were saying before about paper prototyping.
yeah,
Not all games lend themselves to paper prototyping. If you're making yourself a, a first-person shooter, you can't really. There's not a lot to do there. It's more about the joy of moving and running and the feel in the engine. But this is the perfect game where you could literally go and make all of these cards on post-it notes, and you could have that flow of, okay, I need, there's wood and then this and that and that. I'd probably personally do it virtually, as I was showing just there. I'd map it out this way
yeah,
because for me that's a lot quicker to do it. I can move it around, I can see it all in one go, I can zoom in. So I would map it out using a mind mapping tool rather than trying to cut the things out and do it
yeah,
in a paper prototyping way. If it was a two-player game, I think then I would possibly put more emphasis on the paper prototyping because it's
yes,
it's much harder to test your game as a multiplayer game when you're prototyping it because it's kind of not all there yet. But
right.
if there was a battle component, then I think I would I'd want to actually do that paper prototype style.
I get it. You know, the other cool part about this is they even thought about like animals. Like a chicken isn't really dangerous, but it moves around and it messes up your cards.
Oh,
So it
right.
just, but every once in a while it lays eggs, and eggs are valuable.
Mm.
So there's this weird like kind of emergent behavior where the chicken is annoying and I'm gonna drag him out of the way, but at the same time he's valuable. So like how much annoying am I gonna put up with for valuable? Because at any time I can just kill him and I can get meat out of him.
How,
But
can you show us how he messes up your cards?
yeah, so if he's right here, like I've got my
Does, it,
stack here and everything's, perfectly
does he eat
aligned.
your corn or he
Well,
just
he'll move the stuff around. He'll mess up my organization, and I've
ah.
been to late game on this game, and it can get pretty, you know, like it can get very annoying having him jump around and do stuff. So like right there, so he pops out an egg, and an egg I can eat, right? So I like keeping him around, and you can actually make other stuff with eggs on the stove. But after you have them around for a while, it gets annoying. Now there is an animal pen here that I can build, and I can
Ah,
keep him in there. But I just put him on the animal pen card, and it's just fascinating. This game's called Stacklands. David brings up a
Stackland.
good point too. He says keep the player engaged too. If it's too repetitive, it gets boring fast. Yeah, that's another part of it too. This very easily could be too repetitive, right? Because you're basically doing the same action over and over again. Like if you take all the colors and the pictures off of the cards, it's the same thing. I'm just dragging cards on cards.
So you need to
Um,
have some variation and unpredictability to keep it fresh.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that this game is a systemic game that works exactly the same way, but they added in card variants is what makes it work. Because a lot of survival games, they all have like a meta kind of like you got to build this and then you got to build this and then you got to build that. There's a right way to play, and the way that those games kind of exist as games is the fact that they randomize the resources or whatever, right? So you need wood, but you got to go find wood, and wood's in a different spot every time. And it really worked really well with the card mechanic this time of randomizing cards in a deck. It just fit beautifully. Now, granted, I'd be willing to bet they put a lot of work into fine tuning and finding this concept. I don't think this is a eureka moment where you just invent this whole thing in your head at one time, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it starts with a prototype and then you mess with it and you iterate on it and you kind of
Mhm.
do stuff over time. We'll fight the
Yeah.
chicken.
I take a lot of comfort, might not be the right word, but I think it's awesome that technically this game doesn't look crazy difficult, sophisticated, that most of us after, having a year of playing around in Unity and solidly dedicating our time to getting better at C Sharp and at the engine, or if you're in Unreal and Blueprint, you could get to the point where you could have, okay, placing down cards, moving cards around, having a user interface, having cards interact with one another. The actual creation of it to get it actually working doesn't seem super complex. We could figure it
Right.
out. Then the magic comes in. How do we turn this into a joyful experience? And I'm often thinking about that from the point of view of beginners from a technical lens. If we're looking at a game that looks too complex, difficult, there's amazing procedural generation, or the game we are looking at before, Townscaper. It's I wouldn't know how to go to do that procedural, clicking things together. I'd need to go and research that. Maybe it's simple, maybe it's
Right.
not. Um, but when you see games that are really cool and have an innovative aspect to them, and you think I could probably figure out how to do that, I think that's really exciting. Doesn't need to be crazy complex, a PhD in computer science to make these things.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone asked if these are randomized. So these are like card packs that you might buy, Pokemon cards. They at the bottom left here, you can see what it contains, but it's random which cards you get. So
Mm.
that's a really cool um, combination of card stuff and survival stuff too, right? Like I don't know what I'm gonna get when I buy a card pack.
Nice. Tim, thanks for showing us that game. I think it'd be cool if we transition into taking any questions from those who are here hanging out with us live. So, as we usually do on our live cast, give people a chance to ask questions. If you're working on a game and you're struggling for ideas, or if you've got something that you want to share with us, or just any questions at all about your learning journey, then let us know. We'll take 5 minutes of questions before we wrap her all up. And also,
Yeah.
if you guys watching at the moment or later on in the comments, if you've got any feedback about us getting and doing more deep dive into games, talking about the game design of things, looking at the logic of it, let us know if you're interested in us doing more of that, because Tim and I love doing that stuff, but we don't know if you guys are interested in watching us do that stuff. So any
Yeah.
feedback you have is great. So we are taking questions. If you would like to throw any questions. Normally, there's a bit of a delay between me going blah, 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 and then people hearing me say blah, 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 and then the questions going, yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. I think this is a hard question for you, Rick, but do you have a definition for what a game is?
uh, good one. So, thanks, Tim.
Because I've went
Uh,
back and forth on this, and I don't know if there
I
is one. I
do.
don't know if we need one.
Yeah. So for me, I've thought about this, but it was a while ago. I haven't thought about it recently. So thanks for the trip down memory lane. This is cool. Uh, for me, there's play and there's game. So play is an enjoyable activity. That's, there's probably better definitions, but just an enjoyable activity is play, where there's not necessarily rules and there's not necessarily an outcome. You're just playing. Let's just run around. Let's just throw some rocks. I believe as soon as you put an objective, then it becomes a game. So, hey, let's just run around and kick the ball. That's play. Hey, let's see if we can kick the ball 10 times without missing. That's a game. Hey, let's just throw rocks into the pond. That's play. Let's see if we can throw rocks to hit that big boulder in the middle of the pond. That's a game. So, an objective for me is when it becomes a game.
So if the game was roll a dice and hit a 3, and we keep rolling dice until we hit 3, that's still a game to you, even though there's no decisions being made. It's all technically random. Who wins?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a game.
Uh,
I personally don't enjoy playing games that are 100% chance, but it's absolutely valid. That's still a
yeah.
game. It's just a chance-based game. And there's the continuum for 100% chance. So, Yahtzee, 100% chance, all the way up to no chance, 100% skill, which is chess. And
Right.
I think you're saying before, I think you're giving an example of kids with, we call it snakes and ladders, but I think you call it shoots and ladders. That's just chance. And
Yeah.
when you're younger, you like that because it's clear and it's clean and you don't get stuck and you feel control over it.
Right.
But I think as you get older, you want to have more decisions and skill, and you want to feel like that was me doing that.
Yeah. That makes
Why do
sense.
you ask, Jim?
I've went back and forth on the definition, and I've thought about it a lot, and I I don't know. I thought I had it figured out, but then I see things like those bright lights on a Monopoly game, right? That where you're not making any decisions, but people are having fun. These bright lights and this polish and these animations are coming at you, and people have fun. And I'm like, isn't that what a game is supposed to do, right? Like, so, like,
Yeah.
why does it matter if it's not under my definition? But I was just
I
curious.
think and this is touching on one of the comments we've got now, comment thingy here. Um, I personally think the categorization play is just doing something enjoyable. That's play. You know, that's very vague, but anyway, we kind of get it. Game is when we have an objective, and you might also say a win condition and a lose condition, but I don't think you have to have those in a game. You might also
Right.
say decisions, but you don't have to have those in a game. They're elements we often see in a game. Um, but I think the creating or giving someone an experience, that's what transforms just the mechanic of, oh, this is a game, into something which is enjoyable, which is compelling, which is interesting. And then when you mush in that whole experience aspect, you can also dial down the objective component. So what we're looking at, first of all, Townscaper, is it a game? There's no objective, but it was giving me an experience where I was making choices. Therefore, it's kind of a game because that overtakes. It doesn't have to be objective, but it kind of does have an objective. I need to click to put things down. So I think there's exceptions to it, and that's why we're looking at Townscaper and saying, is it a game or is it just a virtual experience? Is it play? This is the whole, it's giving me an experience. It's the joy of creating a town, or it's very pleasant, or it's very relaxing. But it is more on the play side of things than it is on the game side of things.
Right. That makes sense.
Yes. Have we found any questions in here? Oh, this
Someone
is a good
said,
one. Good one. Sorry to jump in. Cantankerous, our good old buddy. So, do you start with the objective, the mechanic, or the experience? I don't
depends on
think it
what day of the
matters.
week it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't think it matters. You start where inspiration strikes, and sometimes it starts with an idea in your head. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if you do this and you do that? So I would say that
yeah.
could start with the mechanic. Um, or it could start with, I want to make a horror game where I scare people. So you're starting with the experience. Or you might say, I want to make a game where you have to, run through the level as fast as you can. You start with the objective. So I kind of don't think it matters. You start somewhere.
I started, this is something I was messing around with a few days ago. And this isn't even a game. I was just like, I'm doing some art tests. Like, I might just start with the aesthetic, right? Of like, what would happen if
Mm,
I put some cool light retro stuff on top of a grid? Like, it can start anywhere. And I think a lot of people assume that the professionals do it a different way, or they have some kind of secret that we don't have. But I don't think there's a right place to start. I think once you know what you're building, I think there are better processes and procedures to kind of get you along or get you to the finish line. But yeah, honestly, whatever inspires you the most, and whatever you can kind of, whatever your skill set too. Like, if you're a really good artist, it makes sense to start off with the art or the screenshot, like making it good. Like, I happen to be very good at prototyping, so for me, I often do like mechanical prototypes just to kind of to test stuff out often. But yeah, it's up to the person, it's up to the skill set, it's up to the inspiration, you know.
yeah. Yep, cool. So, Tim, we've hit our 1 hour mark. We've been trying to be a little bit more focused and have our conversations in 1 hour rather than a million hours that we seem to do. So, if you guys have any one last question you'd really like us to answer, then we'll jump into it. And like I was saying before, if you're interested in the game design deep dive, which we've been doing in this conversation, then do let us know. Um, Last time you asked me a deep and meaningful question, Tim. While we're seeing if anyone has any last questions, let's see if we've got one for you. Um, uh,
The answer to
why?
the universe and everything.
Yeah. Why bother? Why bother making games? Like, why bother making or playing games? What's the point of it?
You know, it's funny you said you thought about this in the past, but not recently. That's the same thing for this question. Because
Mm,
like for a while, it was like, why am I wasting people's lives with my creation? Like, why Why am I spending all this time so people can just waste time? And I realized, well, it was something you said that I think really really helped, but I think like you brought up the fact that it can it sort of act as a meditation. I remember a conversation we had like years ago, and the fact that people can kind of get what they need out of meditation in a similar way when they play a game, whether they're building something or um, their brain just connects the systems of the game, or like Stacklands for whatever. It's got. I love card games, and I love casual, simple games that are easy to understand that have depth to them. And this game just makes my brain work in a way that I don't think it normally does. So it's very like um, dopamine to me. I think
Yeah.
games bring joy to people's lives. I think they help people meditate. I think they help people process stuff. I think sometimes they help people disconnect and even sleep, right? Like sometimes I can't sleep and I'll play a game and it'll calm me down enough to go to sleep because my brain doesn't shut off. Um, I think video games are the evolution of what our species has had for many, 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 many decades and longer than that, centuries. And it's just like this idea of a thing that you do uh, to help your brain or your you know yourself kind of become, I don't know, chill in some
You know
ways.
what? I've just finished a really interesting book called 4,000 Weeks, which, the core premise is we have 4,000 weeks to live. What are you going to do with them? And a lot of what's wrapped up in this whole book is that in today's day and age, we have so many things that allow us to move to save time, but we're the most impatient we've ever been. Um, we fill up our days with so much stuff. We are all about chasing productivity and side hustles and getting things done and being effective, that our lives have sped up, but not necessarily for the better. And a lot of people feel this discontent in their lives because there's always like more, 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 faster, faster, faster. And social media amplifies that as well. So much stuff, got to process everything. And so the book is challenging us to say, well, why are you doing that? Why are you trying to move faster? Where are you getting to? There is nowhere to get to. And I'm a little bit more advanced in my years than you are, Tim, and we talk about this a little bit. The more advanced you get, the more you realize there is no train station that I'm going to get to. The train station that we all get to is dead. That's the train station. And it's all about enjoying being on the train and appreciating that. And it sounds a little bit corny, a little bit of, stop and smell the roses. But when we're in a hurry to get somewhere, we miss out on what is life. And I
Yeah,
think video games, reading books, watching TV, going for a stroll in the park, sitting out on your back porch doing nothing, these are all ways to slow down your life and just be in the moment. And I think video games for a lot of people are the best way to do that. That's always been in my life, play a game for an hour in the
yeah,
evening before going to bed. It's a way to just slow down your life, have a hobby, and use a different part of your brain.
absolutely. The other day, my brother and I were going to play Xbox for the first time in like months. We used to hang out all the time, but our life has been busy, and we were both waiting on our giant 90 gigabyte downloads to download. So we were talking, and we saw the new Ninja Turtles game was on Xbox Game Pass. And so I was like, hey, dude, do you want to just play that? Because that looks like super simple. It was like 1 gigabyte. So we ended up playing it, and it was like we spent like 5 hours. From start to finish, we beat the entire game. And
Mm.
if you guys don't know the Shredder's Revenge Ninja Turtle game, it's a new game that's made to look retro, and it's got kind of 20 years of like Ninja Turtle stuff in it, and it brought me back to like childhood with my brother. We used to play it on the NES, right? Like the Ninja Turtle game. And dude, it was the most magical experience ever. Like sharing that nostalgia with him, but also hanging out with him and like just beating up a bunch of bad guys with our Ninja Turtles. Like it made no sense. It doesn't serve any practical purpose, but it was such an enjoyable experience. And I'm going to remember that for many, many years, right? I got to spend time with a loved one, but at the same time, I got to just, I don't know, go into this flow state where we just hung out and just were there, right? Whereas I don't know if we could spend 5 hours on the phone together, you know? Like I love my brother, but I don't know if we could just talk for 5 hours. Like that's
Mm,
not something I do. But that game kind of facilitated that, right? And it was
yeah,
amazing, and I loved it.
cool. Uh, got one last question here that we can jump into before we wrap up. It's a question about monetization and um, what is your planning like on monetizing before designing, during designing, during implementation, and post production? So for me, there's a really big elephant in the room, which is free to play game monetization versus Steam indie game monetization. And for me, I worked for a number of years in a studio that was focusing on free to play mobile and Facebook games. And for me, I didn't enjoy that type of game design because it was deviating from what I think a game is. And I was talking just before about, play and the hour in the evening where you unwind. I think as soon as we have the very crafty free to play mechanics, and I'm talking mobile free to play here. I know the League of Legends free to play is a little bit different model as well, but the monetization of you work for 5 minutes, and then if you want to get more coins because you've run out of coins, you have to pay us $5, and then we'll give you more coins. That sort of monetization, I've really lost interest in that whole. It's a very big industry. It's a very big part of game development, but I've lost interest in talking about it because I think it's not video games. And I know that's very controversial. It's technically video games, but it's not. For me, video games is okay, pay me your money, pay me your $10, $20, $50, whatever, and then here you go. And I'm going to give you this big immersive experience. And money and paying for stuff is not going to get in the way. That's
Yeah,
that's a different all the psychology that gets wrapped up in it when I'm designing a game mechanic to say, okay, if you shoot this thing, you get a bonus and it's going to drop out a thing, but you can make that thing even better if you give us some money. It kind of it changes it. You go from being game designers, I think, to being, I don't know, any sort of product developers or marketing folks.
yeah,
So that's my kind of a little bit controversial, a little bit jaded and cynical look at that. And so then I would say for most indie game developers, if you're making a game for Steam, just make the best game possible and do your research on what you should charge for it. If you're making mobile games, then I'm still of the same mindset. I've always thought this: make a really great game, charge whatever $3 on the Play Store or seven or two or one or whatever it might be, and do it where you give people the free experience first, a level or feature reduced so they can really get into it and excited about it. Say if you want the bigger experience, then pay the X amount of dollars. That for me is good game design and good game development. And I'm more interested in that than it's free forever, but we're going to try to trick you into giving us $10. So
yeah.
there's my rant
I
on
mean,
that.
I have a friend named Bart that he built an entire RPG himself. He launched it on the Play Store for free. He updated it for a year and a half without making a penny. Slowly started to gain an audience. And as it did, then he was like, okay, I'm going to put in a donate button. I'm going to give some extra stuff. I'm going to add, ads or whatever. And slowly he started to build an income off of that. But I, you need the audience first before you can monetize, right? I think, especially new developers, they think about monetization way too much. Like your biggest problem by far is nobody knowing that you exist.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be the big hurdle that you face. And so if you're worried about monetization before you even have a user, you're doing it
I,
wrong. Like
I
you've got to focus more on getting users or getting players more than you ever could monetization.
absolutely. I went through the era. I was right in the thick of it, where the industry, the game development industry, decided that monetization was the most important thing, particularly again in free to play mobile games. So it all became about how do we get the money? How do we get people to buy the coins? How do we get them to buy the pack? How do we give them limited time offers? And that broke the experience for a lot of games where people would
Yeah.
come along and it's just like, oh, this feels icky. And then it took time. I remember it was not weeks, it was years, where the evolution was, okay, let's focus on retention. Let's give people a great game, a great experience. Let's have them love what we're doing. So this is the League of Legends, the Rocket League model, where we give them so much value that after they play our game for weeks and months and years, they're like, you know what? okay, I am interested now in giving you guys $10, $20, $50. And so it became all about this ongoing
Yeah,
service where you gave people, enough joy, then they would pay for it. And I think that is how I would. Yeah, the original question is how and when do you think about monetization? Think about it right from the start and have it looped into all the things that you do based upon what type of monetization model you have, but don't necessarily give it to players right up front. Don't necessarily have it be part of the game.
right.
If that all makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would also just say that, like, in general, if you're a new developer and you're trying to make money with game dev, I understand that that would be a focus, but I really think that you should go through the whole process without charging any money for your first thing, right? Like, I think you need to
Yeah.
understand how much work is involved there, but you also need to understand what happens when you click that publish button. And unfortunately, most of the time, it's nothing. Nothing happens when you hit the publish button, and it takes a lot of work to even get a user. So all of that work that you might be putting into monetization can actually go to waste, and it can kill your motivation, and you double the scope of the game without really even needing to. Whereas if you cut monetization out completely, whether whether it's a paid game or free to play game, and you release it and it gains an audience, you can almost always monetize that audience afterwards, right?
Yep.
So it's just important to keep that in mind, that you can always add it later, but adding it too early actually has a lot of ramifications.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the demo is free, pay for the full experience. I think that's a really nice way of getting a lot of people to check out what you've got with minimum barrier to entry. And then you'll find people out there who are like, I want more, give me more. And you're like, cool, it just costs some money. So that I like that model. And that's a pretty simple in terms from a game design point of view. It's pretty simple. What do I give people in the free? How long do I
Yeah,
want to give them as an experience? What features? Is it one level? Is it one gun? Is it 10 minutes? And I think you can design that pretty straightforward.
yeah,
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's pretty good for today. I've enjoyed today's conversation, Tim. Hopefully, we get the thumbs up from the community to do more game design type conversations because it is the tough part of making games. How do you make a game that's going to be interesting, is going to stand out, is going to be compelling? People are going to want to buy it. I think the
yeah,
technical side of stuff, there's a roadmap for that. Here's how you learn how to make things shoot. Here's how you learn how to make things move. But the
yeah.
how do you learn how to make something that people are going to really want to spend time playing? That's the trickier part. So I think it'd be good for us to spend some more time talking about game design for a while.
I think so too. I think I have more fun doing that because technical to me is like there's 1,000 ways to implement everything technically, but game design stuff,
Yeah,
it's like you find something like Stacklands and it excites me because I'm like, it's done
awesome,
beautifully. Cool.
awesome, cool. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today, everyone. Thanks for the questions and the comments. Thank you, Tim. Lovely hanging out with you. And we will see everyone again, same time, same bat channel next week, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So catch you
Yep.
guys later.
Bye, everybody.